What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, December 27th, 2017, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday and the New Year's weekend. And again, as I mentioned yesterday, this week I'd kind of like to open up the phone lines for people to call on in and talk about the good things about 2017, the bad things. Has Donald Trump lived up to the campaign that he ran last year? Are we getting the Donald Trump that we voted for? How you feel about the fact that now it appears the FBI was protecting Hillary Clinton from all her criminality. So let's get some opinions in there. And also, of course, if you've got a New Year's resolution, you can go ahead and call in with that one. My New Year's resolution is to not make stupid resolutions. I'm only going to break 2 weeks down the road, but that's just me. All right, let's get into it. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And a lot of people are talking about Donald Trump's latest executive order, and somebody even sent me the actual text of it, which I went through, basically targeting human rights abusers and the corrupt. Remember, we were reporting the other day that Putin is cracking down on corruption in Russia, and it looks like Trump wants to do the same here, saying that anybody involved in corrupt practices, they're going to be subject to sanctions, asset seizure, and so forth. And it would almost seem like much of this could be applicable to the Clintons, to the Clinton Foundation, to anybody connected with the Uranium One deal, which is starting to turn out to be just a huge percentage of the people inside the Beltway had their finger in that particular pie. But it sounds good. I want to see it put into action. I'm tired of speeches. I'm tired of written pronouncements. I'm tired of documents. It's time to see some of these people in prison. No more phony baloney. We're going to have another investigation, and oh, gee whiz, well, the blame was spread so thinly in all directions, it's not fair to single anybody out, blah, 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 blah. No more of those. Now, apparently today, Vanity Fair trashed Hillary Clinton in their New Year's resolutions video, suggesting that Hillary should resolve to find new hobbies, like knitting, to keep her from running in 2020. So I'm not the only person who's out there thinking that Hillary is, in fact, going to throw her hat in the ring in 2020. More rumors, George Clooney may step on in as well. So Trump has got 3 more years to deliver on his campaign promises, or he's going to be a single-term president. Now, Ron Paul the other day put out his weekly column on Christmas Day, and he just delivered this blistering analysis on how political immorality is the norm in Washington, D.C., and not the exception. And he was responding to the recent revelations about how many millions of taxpayer dollars have been spent to buy the silence of sexual abuse victims of federal politicians. And Ron Paul came out and said, why would anybody be surprised? We have a government that kills for profit and steals from its own people. Of course it's going to be full of rapists and abusers. It's the perfect government for somebody like that. It's the curse of political power. It attracts the very people who should not be allowed to have it. And Washington, D.C. has proven that yet again. Now, yesterday we were reporting on this ugly story where there was a teacher who was flying from Houston to Washington, D.C., and she had purchased a first-class seat. And she's waiting in line to get on the plane, and ahead of her is Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who was pulled out of line by a uniformed airline employee, United, and taken on board the plane. And when this teacher, Jean Marie Simon, gets up to the check-in gate, she's told her ticket has disappeared. And asked, you must have canceled the ticket. Jean Marie said, no, of course I didn't. So the airline gives her a coach seat, and when she's getting on the airplane, there's Sheila Jackson Lee sitting in the first-class seat that this teacher had bought and paid for. And so she raised a little bit of a stink because it felt to her like she'd been booted out of her first-class seat that she'd paid for to make way for the Congresswoman. And it was a big stink, and United Airlines ultimately gave her $1,000 in travel vouchers to try and calm things down. But Sheila Jackson Lee really should know when to keep her mouth shut, because today she came on out saying that the only reason the teacher made a ruckus about losing her first-class seat to Sheila Jackson Lee is that Sheila Jackson Lee is black and the teacher is white, and clearly Sheila Jackson Lee is the victim here of obvious racism, because if it had been another black person or if they'd both been white, of course any airline passenger who has bought and paid for a first-class seat is not going to have any problems at all being kicked out of that seat. Now, I don't know how many of you have flown first class. Obviously, Claire and I tend to fly coach, but there have been occasions where we have been treated to first class seating. It is everything you think that it is. And so, yeah, if I bought and paid for a first class seat and it was taken away from me to give to some politicians, I would be very upset. So Sheila just managed to make herself look even more pitiful and snowflakey, saying, I'm the victim of racism. You're not the victim. You got the first-class seat. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, over at Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton is getting ready this Friday to release all of these government emails that were found on the laptop shared by Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner. And it's looking like there may be some significant developments there. So Judicial Watch's Tom Fitton is out there saying it's all going to come on out. There's the Clinton email, the pay-for-play scandals, and he's saying it's not just a Clinton scandal. It's an Obama scandal. It's a Department of State scandal. It's a Department of Justice scandal. It's an FBI scandal. It's a shady corporation scandal. It's a foreign potentate scandal. This thing is just spreading all over the place. And again, it's going to be entertaining to see how everybody inside the federal government who had their hand dipped into any of these scandals are going to be trying to prevent them from coming on out. Because it's more than just losing jobs and losing the next elections. We're talking about felony violations and jail time here. Now, down in Alabama, apparently Roy Moore still has not conceded the election. He's down 1.7 points, and he only needs to come within half a point to spark a statewide mandatory recount, which will be limited because much of the voting records have already been destroyed. But absentee ballots from military service members have still not been counted. And Mobile County, which was a heavily pro-Jones county, tabulated its votes later than the pro-Moore counties and eventually gave Jones the lead. So that right there is a little suspicious. And this article goes on to say that there is evidence of voter fraud in the election. See, if it's a close election, you hold one county back. So if you need to go in and fudge the numbers to put your boy over, that's where it's going to happen. Okay, let's get into the war zones here. A lot of stuff going on. Apparently, the Syrian government forces are predicting that next year the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham forces will be eliminated. They will be totally gone. And, of course, this is the group that used to be called Jabhat al-Nusra. But they're definitely on the run out there. And they're already looking, they're basically in the mop-up phase. They've basically won the war. Now they're just going to go and mop up and clean up. Now, the chief of the Russian General Staff, Gerasimov, is out there saying that the United States is allowing their bases in Syria, which are there without the permission of the Syrian government, it should be noted, to be used to train the U.S.-backed rebels and even to mount attacks onto Syria from those bases. And obviously Syria does not like that. and obviously Russia does not like that. But even with the defeat of ISIS and al-Qaeda, the U.S. clearly still has designs on getting rid of Assad and putting in puppet rule. But as of right now, the best estimates are there are less than 1,000 Daesh fighters left in Iraq and Syria. Less than 1,000. Quite a far cry from their self-proclaimed caliphate of a year ago. Now, over in Turkey, President Erdogan is slamming Syria's President Bashar al-Assad as a terrorist. He's carried out state terrorism. It's impossible to continue with Assad. So Erdogan is definitely on board with the regime change policy inside Syria. And again, going back over the 6 years of this war, the war was always ongoing. The excuse kept changing. Oh, we're there because Assad is gassing his own people. Oh, we're there to get ISIS and al-Qaeda. We really don't care about Assad. Oh, now that ISIS and al-Qaeda are gone, we have to go after Assad because he's a terrorist. Now, Russia has cozied up to Turkey after agreeing on a 1.8 billion pound sterling arms deal. And this basically represents a snub by Turkey against the NATO allies by agreeing to buy Russian weapons. So Moscow is sending Ankara 4 divisions of S-400 surface-to-air missiles once the agreement is finalized. And these are a very good, potent air defense missile with a 250-mile range. And NATO is whining and crying because the S-400 cannot be integrated into NATO's westernized battle management system. And I'm sure the loss of profits to the defense industry was a factor as well. Pardon me. Now, as you know, the United States has made the decision to send lethal arms to Ukraine, supposedly defensive lethal arms. But in the heat of battle, it's kind of hard to keep a line between offensive and defensive. Lethal is lethal. And Russia is saying that the United States has crossed a red line, although the U.S. has been covertly arming Kiev for years. So that thing is still heating up over there. Now, we're still seeing the after effects of the United Nations General Assembly voting to condemn Donald Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And even though the General Assembly resolutions are not legally binding, they're merely expressing the sense of the Assembly, it is a major setback for Donald Trump and for Israel. It's sending a very clear message that the rest of the world has just had it with all of this Israel, Palestine, U.S. pretending to be a negotiator nonsense. And they think it's time for it to come to a stop. And now apparently there is talk floating around the United Nations that it's time for sanctions against Israel. And you already know how badly Israel has reacted to the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. More sanctions from around the world. They're going to get really angry because they get really annoyed at anybody or anything that gets in the way of that flow of cash coming into their pockets. But it was a major setback. And you could have countries just taking it on themselves to start boycotting Israel. So we'll see what happens there. But it also was a setback for Donald Trump because the world basically said, we're not following the lead of the United States of America anymore. You're not the leaders of the free world. You're a player, you're coming along for the ride, but you're not the leader. And it was not a good thing for Donald Trump to do domestically because the majority of the American people do not agree with this idea of recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Meanwhile, Israel, throwing a tantrum, has reportedly stepped up settlement construction activities in the West Bank, emphasis on illegal settlement construction. And basically, the Palestinian foreign minister has called for the international institutions to confront the move. because Israel, under international law, is not allowed to build Jewish-only settlements in occupied Palestinian land. So according to the report, 15 new settlement housing units as well as new roads are planned to be built in the area to the west, south, and east of the Aiea settlement in the Palestinian village of Jalud. And more agricultural lands are reportedly being bulldozed to clear the construction site. In other words, it's not enough that they're going in and stealing land and building on Palestinian land. They bulldoze the agricultural land to build the settlements over the farmland of the Palestinians to make it harder for them to feed themselves and their families. Now, along with cutting back the United States contribution to the United Nations by 200 some odd million, both Israel and the United States have decided to walk out of UNESCO, which is the United Nations committee that deals with preservation of historical sites and archaeological sites. And basically, U.S. and Israel have walked out. The reaction has been basically goodbye and good riddance, because UNESCO has had a great deal of interference from the United States and Israel when it comes to preserving antiquities in countries like Palestine, Iraq, Libya, and Syria. The U.S. in Iraq actually built an air base right over the remains of an ancient city. And that obviously means it's no longer there. Now, the reason for all of this is Israel basically rests its claim on the lands of Palestine on the basis of its supposed ancient history from 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. There's only one problem. There really isn't a lot of archaeological evidence to support any of it. And a few bits of evidence that turned out to be fakes, like the pomegranate temple staff ornament and the Jehoash tablet. Meanwhile, you go to any other ancient land in that area, you can't take 3 steps without tripping over the artifacts from thousands of years ago. They're all over the place. And this disparity calls attention to itself. Nobody has ever been able to find the fabled amazing palaces of David and Solomon. For all we know, they were just tribal chieftains living in tents. Because that's what the archaeology says was in the region at that time, nomadic tribes moving around. So Israel would like some of those other archaeological wonders to go away, to sort of level the playing field and basically say, well, you know, we've got a few artifacts here, and so do they, because they really do rely on archaeology, much of which has been rewritten to suit their politics. Masada is a good example. The actual archaeology does not support the official story. So the U.S. and Israel, as members of UNESCO, have very often interfered with the preservation of ancient ruins. And you probably remember quite a few notable temples have been destroyed in Syria during their war. Absolutely flattened. So UNESCO is kind of thinking their job might actually be easier now. So we'll see what happens with that. Apparently over in Greece, in Athens, activists stormed the Israeli embassy and threw red paint bombs at the front of the building in their protest of Israel's ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Trump has kicked over a real hornet's nest. This is not going to go away anytime soon. And the anger just seems to be building and building at the arrogance of it all. And it was arrogant. And people are just fed up with all the lies and the make-believe and the fairy tales that Israel uses to try and steal other people's lands. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And for those of you who want to help Republic Broadcasting stay on the air, the postal address to send a check or money order is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you want to phone on in and becoming a repeat subscriber, the phone number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And I've gotten some emails from people wanting an update on Claire. And I'm pretty much over this bug. Claire's still dealing with it. We took her to the doctor this morning. In fact, it was a rush getting back here for airtime, and Claire's having to come home by taxi, and she's not here yet. But she's dealing with a nasty cough. They're saying it's not pneumonia, and she's coughed so hard, though, it's put her back into spasm. So she didn't get any sleep last night. I didn't get any sleep last night. And again, today, as soon as the show is over, I'm going to be hovering over her and taking care of her. So thank you for asking, and thank you for all the get well messages, and I'm forwarding them along to Claire, and she does appreciate them. Now, getting on back to Israel, what's going on. As you know, there has been talk for quite some time about how Benjamin Netanyahu is facing some serious career-ending corruption charges. And apparently it's serious enough where they were actually trying to get a bill through the Knesset that would grant immunity to the Prime Minister while he's in office. Can't be investigated, can't be charged, can't be prosecuted. Of course, that means as soon as he's out of office, that it's all going to come on crashing down. But apparently, Lior Hori, the police commissioner, Eilshik's former political advisor, is saying that police recommendations on Netanyahu's investigations will be coming out in 2 to 3 weeks and include new information that is going to cause a political earthquake. Now, police spokespeople and Netanyahu's office are saying it's just disinformation. Netanyahu wouldn't hurt a fly, so forth and so on. Okay, now, getting on to Russia and Ukraine. Most of us paying attention understand that this was a U.S.-backed coup d'etat. At the time, it was denied, and now apparently enough time has passed where everybody's willing to say, yeah, we did it, aren't we really great? And Joe Biden, writing in his memoirs, is saying that he was the person who told former Ukrainian President Yanukovych it was time to step down. And he also confirmed that the U.S. was in that Kiev Maidan right up to their neck, which we kind of knew. That's how the U.S. likes to topple other governments, destabilize from within. Article coming out of shtfplan.com, and apparently they're talking about there's a report coming from an intelligence insider who is citing the director of Central Intelligence as saying war will be likely in the next 12 weeks. Now, this is supposedly based on the CIA's analysis from last October that it would take North Korea more than 5 months to have a reliable arsenal of nuclear-armed ICBMs that could hit the United States of America. Of course, this is the same CIA that totally missed the Soviet Union going into Afghanistan, or for that matter, the collapse of the Soviet Union. And I seem to recall when the Soviet Union was developing their nuclear weapons, the CIA said it was going to take 2 years, and they had it inside 6 months. So basically, the thinking is, if we're going to attack North Korea, we've got to do it before they have the means to respond. That is a heck of a gamble, given the CIA's past track record of making mistakes, just not having enough facts, not having good analysts. And they're taking a huge, huge risk with the lives of American people who would be underneath those retaliatory strikes coming from North Korea, which includes this rock I'm sitting on right now. Interestingly enough, South Korea is saying their sense is that North Korea is now ready to pursue talks in the coming year. And it may be because they want to defuse the situation. It may be because they see themselves now as negotiating as nuclear equals. But South Korea is saying this could actually happen. And remember the story we ran yesterday where somebody suggested that the opening move on the side of the United States should be an apology for the use of chemical and biological weapons at the start of the Korean War. It would be good. It's never going to happen, but it would be good. It would be very good. Now, China has apparently complied with the sanctions passed against North Korea by the United Nations, and they have stopped all oil exports to North Korea. We'll have more about this when we come back from these commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and Claire just got back to home, so next commercial break I'll check in with her and see what's going on. But again, thanks for your concern and get well wishes. All right, so we're talking about China has now stopped all oil exports to North Korea. Apparently, China sends oil and gas to North Korea by ships, which can be seen by satellites. And so it is confirmed that China has gone along with this. Again, the problem with sanctions is it harms the people living in a country. It doesn't cause that much harm to the government because the government will simply prioritize the limited supply to their military, their own operations, and the needs of the people are just declared to be non-essential. And before you start saying, oh, boo, boo, Kim Jong-un, they did exactly the same thing in this country during World War I and World War II with rationing. Most people don't know this. Margarine was actually a wartime substitute food because all of the real dairy fat products, butter primarily, had to be sent to Europe to keep our soldiers able to deal with the very cold weather that they were having to fight in the European theater. And because there wasn't butter left over for ordinary Americans, somebody whipped up this concoction of various things and called it margarine, and it was a butter substitute. Didn't have the nutrition, didn't have the fat content, but it tasted the same, and that's really all that people wanted. And I'm actually old enough to have seen one of the lingering surviving brands of that vintage where it would come in this plastic bag, and it was white. And in the plastic bag there'd be a little capsule of food color, which would look red when you first saw it. But you basically open that little capsule, and you'd knead it through the bag, and it would turn yellow, and that's what you would have on your table in place of butter. Spam is another wartime food. Spam basically started out as taking everything left over from the processing of more traditional meat products and just grinding it all up real fine so it was easy to chew, spicing it all up, and then packing it in a can with a gelatin fill to preserve it. That was a wartime food, soldier's food. But it really caught on here in Hawaii. And that's why when you come out to Hawaii, there's Spam restaurants all over the place. They love this stuff. There's actually a warehouse with a contingency supply so that people don't get upset if the stores run out of Spam. And so a lot of products that we have today actually began as shortcuts or substitutes during wartime. And then they just sort of adopted. Now, as part of the potential buildup for a coming attack on North Korea, Sky News is already out there pushing an anthrax scare. And basically Sky News is basing this on a North Korean soldier who defected to the South has been found to be immune to anthrax, meaning the guy was either exposed to anthrax and survived, or he's been vaccinated against it. And from that, Sky News is saying North Korea has weaponized anthrax. Now, my first question is, how did the South Koreans know this North Korean soldier is immune to anthrax? Did they dust him with the spores when he walked across that demilitarized zone? It's a little funny. Now, anthrax is a great propaganda word. We've heard it right after 9/11. Oh, anthrax, horrible, horrible disease. The reason countries weaponize anthrax, and the United States is equally guilty. In fact, the anthrax that was included in the anthrax letters after 9/11 turned out to be from a U.S. weaponized strain of anthrax from Fort Detrick. The reason it's so popular is as a battlefield weapon because of what's called secondary communicability. You can infect soldiers on a battlefield with spores, and they'll come down too sick to fight, and they'll have to be cared for. But those infected soldiers will not infect anybody else. They will not infect the doctors and the nurses and the caretakers. So it's basically a way of taking out a battlefield with no risk of a runaway contagion. And that's why it's a battlefield weapon. When they were trying to sell the idea that terrorists were going to put anthrax in New York, anthrax is not an effective terror weapon because a terrorist biological weapon, your targeted population, has to do the work of spreading the disease for you. And anthrax doesn't work that well. But they're wagging the anthrax at us again. Ooh, North Korea, they may have weaponized anthrax. They could have a Death Star. All right, let's take a phone call here. Tom in Indiana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. Was that tongue-in-cheek about that warehouse of Spam in Hawaii?
No, it isn't. It's so important to the culture. They keep a rotating supply that's like a week ahead. I'm not kidding you because it is. It's part of the local Kama'aina culture now.
Hey, I want to refresh your memory, and I didn't know about this till I started to get on YouTube and watch all these shows. But Roger Mudd, did a show about Jim Jones and the CIA and the People's Temple.
Yes.
And it was very interesting how that was interworked, and that was in between the Kennedy assassination and Watergate. You know, so I thought that was pretty interesting. I think people should refresh and see that. The other thing I wanted to say was our moles were full. I live in Indiana, and you had to have a shoehorn to get your car into a parking lot, and we're talking about blocks and blocks and blocks long of people trying to get into these shopping centers around here. Another thing I wanted to say is I was doing some research, and I don't know if you remember a guy by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Terry Lakin. It's Lakin. Do you recall the guy's name?
The name sounds familiar, but I can't quite place it.
Okay, well, he was ordered to go to Afghanistan, and he questioned whether the President of the United States was a natural-born citizen because he had to follow the Constitution. And he ran into the same problems that Trump ran into about all this Russia. They had that fabrication factory that makes up whatever they want to. And he ran into that same buzzsaw. And, you know, they couldn't even get him the facts for the trial. Anyway, he was subsequently court-martialed. He was had his 17 years of Army pension taken away from him. Yeah. And he was put in jail for 6 months, and also his medical license was taken away from him. Now, I'm wondering if the people out there would help petition to try to have Trump get him a pardon so he could at least get his medical license back. I know he probably could go work in the VA hospital, but the dirty tricks that he ran into is the same dirty tricks that Trump has ran into. It seems like they honed their skill later on for Trump. So, you know, I just wanted to touch bases with you on that. And I also, in this year, I found your program. So I'm very happy. That's one of my things that my New Year's resolution is I'm going to listen to your show as much as I can in 2018. And good luck to you, Mike, and aloha.
Aloha. Thank you very much for that. And, yeah, the CIA is known for dirty tricks and forged documents. There's nothing new there. It goes all the way back to Renaissance times, forging documents to falsely incriminate people. We're going to switch over now to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Hanging in there.
Great. Did you ever watch Little House on the Prairie?
I think one time out of curiosity, and I wasn't really that impressed.
Well, there was an episode on Little House on the Prairie about anthrax.
Yes.
Season 5, episode 23 in 1979. And it was basically about an anthrax outbreak in Walnut Grove. And what had happened was, a cattleman's herd had come down with anthrax, which is basically a bacteria.
Yes.
And instead of killing, off the whole herd, which you should have done, he just, basically sold the meat to people, and there was an outbreak of anthrax. I mean, it's been around for hundreds of years, and it's just been weaponized, as of late. This century, last century. I keep forgetting we're already in like the 21st century here. But anyways, it's not something that's like new. So it's new that what the United States and other countries have done with it, and to other people. Yes, it used it as a biological weapon, but you don't have to necessarily, be dosed with it, artificially with dried spores and that. I mean, it still exists out in the wild. Yeah, but for humans, if you get anthrax just by touching the spores with your hand, such as touching the cattle, it's very mild illness. It's only when it's inhaled into the lungs that it's a major, major problem, and that's why the weaponization of anthrax is about these very fine spores that drift down on the air and are inhaled by the soldiers. Yeah. I just wanted to, give you a call and let people know, because, I know, like, some people don't know these things, right? Yes. But this stuff has been around a long, long, long time. It's nothing new, It's like, oh, my God, it's anthrax. No, it's not that bad, Well, I mean, for ranchers, it could be the end of the ranch. I mean, if it got out of control. And, the idea is when cattle are exposed, they have to be put down. So I can understand why they did that episode on Little House on the Prairie. But anthrax has been around for a very long time. It's been a major problem for the cattle industry. I think it was Louis Pasteur who basically came up with a way to vaccinate cattle against anthrax, and that's why it's no longer the problem it once was. But you're absolutely right. The weaponization of anthrax as a weapon to use against human beings, that's relatively new. All right. I just wanted to chime in and share that, because obviously some people don't know. I appreciate your time, Mike. You have a good one. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And, the vast majority of biological weapons are, in fact, adapted from already existing life forms. And they just fine-tune them to use as a weapon. That's hence the name weaponization. So Sky News is out there screaming that North Korea probably has weaponized anthrax on the basis of this one defector who somehow or other they discovered is immune to anthrax. That's the weak point in the story. Now, down in Africa, in Cameroon, Cameroon is a French-speaking nation ruled over by President Paul Biya, who's been in that office since 1982. But over in the western part, close to the border with Nigeria, most people speak English. And they're talking about creating a new nation in Africa out of a tiny part of Cameroon and possibly Nigeria. And they're planning on calling it Ambazonia, which is an interesting little name. But that's definitely going against the direction of the New World Order and the global government. Okay, turning to the economic news here. Russia and China are backing the petro-yuan and phasing out the U.S. dollar. The world's largest crude oil importer, China, is likely to roll out the petro-yuan next year. This is a prediction from Saxo Bank, and Beijing's largest oil supplier, Russia, would gladly accept the yuan to phase out the dollar in trade with China. So the dollar is definitely in decline, and at some point it'll reach a flashpoint where everybody's going to say, we all need to bail. We all need to get on out. And, of course, that's the whole point of this new world war, to take the world back to Bretton Woods, where everybody is compelled to use the U.S. dollar for cross-border trade and banking so that the U.S. economic system prospers on the commerce of the rest of the world.
All right. Sorry for all the coughing and everything. Still a lot of confusion over Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general. And a lot of people are wondering, I'm one of them, what are you going to do with it? I still haven't worked all of that out. But apparently there are more and more places that are accepting cryptocurrencies as payment, particularly among online retailers. Apparently Overstock is accepting Bitcoin. Apparently there are realtor agents in the U.S. and Great Britain that are accepting Bitcoin payments for homes. And apparently in Albany, New York, there's a car dealership that specializes in supercars that will let you pay for them in cryptocurrencies. So in theory, you could go up to this car lot, type over your Bitcoins, and drive away in a brand new Lamborghini. Well, that's kind of interesting. Now, somebody put up a video, and I'm going to give you the headline exactly, because I want you, during this next commercial break, go to the main page of whatreallyhappened.com and look for it. And the headline reads, "Welcome to Skid Row 2017. It is a video somebody shot from a car driving through downtown Los Angeles, through this one area where 20,000 homeless people are living on the streets. You cannot look at this video and think that we have a healthy, functioning economy. It is just stunning. It reminds me of dystopian science fiction movies that we've seen. Soylent Green. So again, the headline is "Welcome to Skid Row 2017." And I thought we had it bad here in Hawaii. It's nothing like Los Angeles. Nothing like Los Angeles at all. And here's the part that really annoys me. There is all this money that is being spent to prop up the illegal immigrants and the refugees. And there is nothing being spent to help legal American citizens who've fallen on hard times climb back up into the system. That offends me. I find that incredibly angering that the government places the refugees and the immigrants at a higher priority than our own people. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the economic news here. And there's an article talking about OPEC and how that deal may actually be in trouble, could collapse. And basically the OPEC agreement among those oil-producing nations keeps the oil market on track, basically balancing supply and demand. But if the group were to overshoot on tightening, OPEC members could begin cheating, and that could lead to an unraveling of the deal. Now that would have serious repercussions for investors in oil products. But without OPEC holding everybody together in this cartel, we might see prices drop as the individual nations try and struggle for a larger share of the market. We're getting another report. This one is still unconfirmed, that China may still be trying to find a way to sell oil and gas to North Korea. But at this point, we're not sure how real that one is. Over in Scotland, next year, they're starting an experiment in universal basic income. And so people living in the cities of Glasgow, Edinburgh, Fife, and North Ayrshire may soon receive an unconditional monthly sum from the government as part of a series of universal basic income pilots currently being explored with support from the local government. And it sounds like a good idea. Every month you get free money, and you go on out and you pump it into the economy. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. The issue is, where is all the money coming from to begin with? Because at the bottom of any functioning economy, you have to have people who are trading their skills and their labor for decent wages and salaries. If you're just creating money out of thin air to pass out for free, it's going to look really good for a short amount of time until the inflation kicks in. Now, up in Europe, there is a growing phenomenon, and it's particularly prevalent in Norway. And it has to do with the refugees and the assimilation problem, because apparently immigrant families residing in Norway are sending their children back down to Somalia to what are called Quran schools. And they're doing this even against the kids' own wishes to prevent the children from being westernized, to prevent them from adapting to the European culture. And again, that is usually not what makes a good refugee or migrant. You celebrate your own culture in your own home, but once you're outside that door, you're in a new country. And that country has its own culture, its own tradition, its own laws, its own language. And Teddy Roosevelt used to say it. If you want to come to the United States as an immigrant, welcome. Just remember, you're now in the United States. We have one language, English. We have one set of laws you will have to follow. That's just polite. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, as you know, we're coming up on the Winter Olympics, and there's already this big stink about keeping the Russians out, and the U.S. may boycott. And I think sports, like science, should be free from politics. But that's not the world that we live in. Interestingly enough, the European Union says that they are going to change the way athletes from the European Union member nations are being presented. And instead of having the French team and the Swiss team and the German team and the Italian team, the EU wants a single European Olympic team to get away from all this nonsense about national identity. And I imagine the teams will be very, very large. But you know, there really is nothing wrong with a national identity, unless you're a globalist, and you want that all to go away. So it's one planet, one throne, one private central bank. So they're getting into the politics of the Olympics again. Here's an interesting little story. You've all heard of the Southern Poverty Law Center. They list my website on their official list of websites you should never, ever, 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 ever look at, or your nose will fall off, of which I'm very proud, I might add. Apparently over Christmas, their hate tracking system was tracking hashtags, hashtag Christmas, hashtag Merry Christmas, hashtag Jesus, and hashtag Christmas Eve. And according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, people using these hashtags, Merry Christmas, represent a range of extremists, from conspiratorial fringes of mainstream conservatism to outright white supremacists. Ooh, Christmas is bad, Christmas is bad. No, Southern Poverty Law Center, you're just trying to politicize it again. Over in Africa, as you know, Zimbabwe has been through some dramatic changes through the years. And one of the dramatic changes was that under President Robert Mugabe, white farmers were being kicked off their farms, and the farms were being turned over to new black farm owners, who, as it transpired, didn't have the knowledge and skill set to make the farms functional. So they basically just lay there fallow, not producing food, increasing the economic pressure in Zimbabwe. But under the new government of President Emerson Mnangagwa, I think I got that right, they're reversing it. They're going back to the white farmers and saying, go home, the farm is back to being yours, get it up and running again. So a little bit of progress being made there. Okay, now, apparently London Mayor Sadiq Khan has reiterated that Donald Trump is not welcome to visit there and wants Trump to cancel the planned visit. Sadiq Khan is saying London is a beacon of tolerance, acceptance, and diversity, and for that precise reason, an official visit by the U.S. president would not be welcomed. Well, here we have another example where somebody's out there talking about tolerance, acceptance, and diversity, as long as you don't disagree with me. Do you see the double standard that's on display there? Where is Sadiq Khan's tolerance of a different point of view? Where is Sadiq Khan's acceptance of the fact that other people will have different ideas? Where is Sadiq Khan's respect for diversity of intellectual approaches to different problems? And it's really becoming very obvious among the liberal snowflakes that they talk about tolerance and acceptance and diversity and love, but they don't practice it. It's like the other day when I was making that comment about how we're being constantly exhorted to be respectful and accepting and tolerant of other religions like Judaism and Islam, and yet that same tolerance and acceptance is not being shown toward Christians. And I actually got an email from somebody saying, well, the reason for that is that Christian is such an exclusionary religion because they claim to be the only way to heaven. Well, pretty much every religion claims that they're the path to whatever afterlife is being offered. But no, there's a clear bias there. Be accepting and open to Islam. Be accepting and open to Judaism. But those Christians, by golly, they're a problem. Southern Poverty Law Center says so. They're a bunch of extremists. It's a very obvious double standard there. Now, obviously, I'm not religious, Claire is. But it's like that old saying, I may not agree with what you're saying, but I will defend your right to say it. And I think that applies to religion as well. I don't want to see anybody's religion, being sort of excluded from this area of tolerance and acceptance. I don't think that's making things any better in the world. I think it's making them worse. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliate who just rejoined our network here. Let me punch a few buttons, get things going. Over in Saudi Arabia, apparently they have released 23 of the Saudi oil billionaires who were arrested last November on corruption charges. And apparently 23 of them out of 200 reached basically settlement deals with the government, where they turned over a portion of their fortune to the government, which is cash-strapped, and now they've been set free. Some of the others are basically still making a decision. Some are actually going to go to trial because they think they're innocent of the corruption charges. What's interesting, of course, is they are being treated very well. They're being held at Riyadh's luxurious Ritz-Carlton Hotel. So it's not like they're enduring any real hardships, although there have been rumors of some physical abuse on some of the more recalcitrant individuals there. Now, I really did not want to get into the Las Vegas massacre again, but there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of videos out there insisting that there's gunfire coming from here, from there, and everywhere. This story kind of stuck out. And I want to preface it with a reminder that not too long ago it came on out the Mandalay Bay Hotel had hired a public relations firm that was deliberately planting bizarre, nonsensical conspiracy theories all over the Internet to muddy the discussion as to just what happened at the Mandalay Bay Hotel and that concert across the street. So now apparently there is a new documentary out. And I think they're trying to basically limit the damage because everybody is seeing all the signs of cover-up, 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 cover-up. The new documentary comes on out and says, yes, actually there was a cover-up by the police, but only because the Mandalay Bay Casino paid the police to cover up certain aspects. So yes, you are right, there's evidence of a cover-up, but there's nothing really important being covered up. It's just the Mandalay Bay protecting their reputation and not scaring the gamblers and tourists off to some other casino elsewhere on the Strip. That's the new spin that's being put on it. Yes, there was a cover-up. It doesn't mean anything. And if you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. Now, here's a good one, and even the corporate media was making a big deal about this. As you know, there was this horrible church shooting in Texas last month. 26 people killed. And the individual who did it should not have been allowed to have guns. And apparently part of the problem was that in his military service, it was determined that he was mentally unstable and dangerous. And somehow that information did not get into the National Gun Check System. This has now prompted 3 cities to sue the Department of Defense, arguing that many service members who are disqualified from gun ownership have not been reported to the National Background Check System. The cities are New York City, San Francisco, and Philadelphia, and they're saying that the military's broken system for relaying such information is what led to that shooting of 26 people in the Texas church. They're saying it's the fault of the Department of Defense. Situation normal, all fouled up. Now, I obviously am a supporter of the Second Amendment. I believe in gun rights. I believe in responsible, safe gun ownership and use. I believe in the right to self-defense of your home, of your person. I believe in the enjoyment and the benefits of sport shooting and hunting to put food on the table, which is something I actually grew up with as a kid. But I agree, there are some people who shouldn't be allowed to have guns. People with known mental issues, people on prescription antidepressants. I'm okay with that. Now, it looks like this big stink about sexual dalliances, if you will, is not going to go away anytime soon. And apparently there's been a big stink up in King County where they have basically arrested, shut down a sex trafficking operation rather. And in the process, they got hold of records of who the customers were of this sex trafficking operation. And apparently 67 of the emails were from Microsoft employee email accounts, 63 from Amazon, and dozens more from companies like Boeing, T-Mobile, Oracle, and other local Seattle tech firms. And apparently this resulted in the arrest of 18 individuals, including high-level Amazon and Microsoft directors. 2 have pled not guilty and are going to trial, which is set to begin in March. And as a result of the revelation of these Amazon and Microsoft directors being involved in sex trafficking or taking advantage of it, the sex trade, using trafficked individuals. So they released statements condemning sex trafficking. Yes, it's a bad thing, and that should make everything all better. Now, story coming out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain, and it's amazing where we have to go to Britain to read about this stuff. But apparently, Snowflake students are making a list, checking it twice, and they're basically making lists of trigger words and then demanding that books that have any of these trigger words are taken down from university libraries. This is from Higher Education Minister Joe Johnson. And the universities have warned institutions they have 4 months to clamp down on student zealots who restrict free speech on campuses, which is exactly what's going on. And when I posted this article about the snowflakes demanding books be removed for having just certain individual words, I paired it with a photo of the Nazi book burnings, because that's how that got started. Oh, there are certain words our people should not have to look at. All right. Now, here's where the snowflakes have really gone over the top. You're probably familiar with the movie It's a Wonderful Life. Stars Jimmy Stewart, directed by Frank Capra. Was all over the cable channels on the holiday season. And apparently, according to this writer over at CNN, it's inherently sexist. And it should be retired because it reinforces the idea of the man as head of the house and the woman as mother and housewife. Well, in the context of when the movie was made, that was the accepted norm. In fact, that was the induced norm. Let me tell you a little bit of a story here. We've all seen the poster of Rosie the Riveter working in the arms plants during World War II. And what happened was when World War II got really cranked up and all the men went off to fight, there was a huge propaganda campaign to convince women, your place is not in the home, in the kitchen. We need you in the factories. Come on over and get a job and have a taste of real money. And so during the war, women were in the factories building airplanes, loading munitions, and all of that. Then the war was over. And the U.S. government had a problem because all of the surviving soldiers from the war zones were coming back home to go back to work. So they launched a propaganda campaign with TV shows and commercials that pushed that 1950s image of American home life. Father knows best. Leave it to Beaver, which sold that idea of the man was out there working and earning the money for the household, and the mother was staying at home taking care of the children and the house. So that's basically how that idea got sold. And now we have over at CNN where they're saying, well, we need to go back to something else here. Maybe they're getting ready as we get close to war. They're getting ready to resell women on the desirability of leaving home and children behind and going back into the bomb factories. So, there we are. Now, this story actually started a little earlier in the week, but it's worth a mention now because of so much that is going on in our country that is the same. Apparently, over in the British National Archives, a massive amount of government documents have just gone away. Golly gee, they were here just a week ago, Governor. And apparently there's a lot of documentation about the Falkland Islands War, the notorious Northern Irish Troubles. And apparently it's come on out that civil servants have simply removed them from the National Archives, according to an investigation by The Guardian. And by odd coincidence, which means it's not a coincidence, the disappearance affects some of the most controversial parts of 20th century British history, namely papers concerning the Falkland Islands Wars and British colonial rule in Palestine. So the files have just walked on out. How 1984 can you get? Because if you remember, that was Winston Smith's job, was to erase or edit history, to line it up with modern dogma. Now, hopefully you all had a very pleasant holiday dinner, but apparently Tesco had some kind of a major supply chain problem because apparently their turkeys they sold for Christmas dinner were described by customers as rotten, rancid, tasting like acid and bleach. And they flooded social media with it, and a lot of customers just didn't even want to take a chance, and they just abandoned the turkeys and went to takeout or some other form of meal. But how do you make a goof that bad? How do turkeys that are that rancid get all the way through the supply chain without somebody noticing something about it? You have to be very careful. You have to be very careful, even here in the United States of America. Check the X dates, and even then you can't be sure. Now, some products like canned fruit, canned vegetables will last beyond the X date or the best by date. Meat and dairy products, not so much. And some markets have actually been caught simply changing the X date, add a few more days on there. So it's kind of weird to be living in a society where you feel like the places you do business with are your adversaries. where you've got to be on constant guard that you're not being sold something that will make you ill just for the sake of a fast buck. Now, apparently, Apple has been hit with a massive fine, $25,000 per day, over their part in the Qualcomm antitrust lawsuit. And apparently, the judge imposed the fine out in San Jose, California. It's retroactive to December 16th and will remain in effect until December 29th, which is Friday. If Apple has not produced all the documents covered by an order issued in October, the fine will be increased. And Apple says it's going to appeal the ruling. And this is a case between the Federal Trade Commission against Qualcomm, who apparently is engaged in some very questionable practices to capture the lion's share of the smartphone market. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about the Qualcomm case. And Qualcomm is based out of San Diego. They're declining comment on the case. But apparently the issue is that Qualcomm has been imposing unfair licensing terms on the makers of smartphones. Okay, I'm getting a message from Mike in our control room. Somebody called in and was on hold, and unfortunately they dropped, and Mike apologizes for not getting to the phone quickly enough, but he was doing something else. And so if you could call back on in, and again for everybody, 800-313-9443, and I would appreciate some phone calls to help fill up the program today, because between Christmas and New Year's there's not really a lot going on. Getting on back to Qualcomm, some of the established players in the high-tech industry have developed a certain degree of arrogance. Anybody who's had to deal with Microsoft knows exactly what I'm talking about. But it's good to see that somebody's finally trying to open things up for more competition, because competition is good. And what's really amazing is when I was in grade school, we were taught this. Competition drove down prices, drove up quality, and made for a better living experience in the United States. And today, the push is all to create monopolies, to create cartels that control the prices and drive prices up, and the quality of the products and services, just not really there. The attitude seems to be, you should just be glad you're getting anything from us. And it's especially true in the software industry, where software is just sent on out full of all kinds of problems. And they just wait for the end user to donate, volunteer their free time or their work time to identify the problems and send them on back. It's really not being handled in what I would consider a civilized manner. All right, going on here. Now, this is a good story. Somebody wrote me the other day saying, where's an up story? This one is really great. 12-year-old girl out in Colorado, Gitanjali Rao, and she's a science enthusiast, and she had been thinking about what happened in Flint, Michigan with the contaminated drinking water. Now, this is a 12-year-old kid, basically put together, invented a device, and it works in seconds. Just a little water sample tray, uses carbon molecules, and it plugs into a mobile app and will tell you if there's lead in the water in seconds instead of having to take the time to send water to a lab. And that, I think, is just amazing. And she's won all kinds of science fairs with it. And boy, I'm glad to see that. I'm glad to see that we do have young people in this country who are really getting to getting into science and developing new products that we can sell to the rest of the world and reverse the balance of trade. This ought to be encouraged. Okay, let's grab a phone call. Robert in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I'm glad you're feeling better, and I hope your wife gets better soon.
Well, I just checked in with her, and, you know, she got the medicine that she needs, and hopefully she's going to start doing a lot better.
Okay. my industry was calling on researchers in the life science industry. Dr. Hagen was a vet up in Cornell Veterinary Medicine, School of Veterinary Medicine. Plum Island Animal Disease Center by the USDA preferred veterinarians to work there during the summer because they didn't take the vow of the oath of Hippocrates to do no harm. So Hagen saw about 4 cases a year of people who would come down with sheep shearer's disease.
Yes.
They would come down with anthrax. They would get the spores. He's the guy that turned it into the weaponized grade Wylant at Plum Island Animal Disease Center. So it's the U.S. that developed that. And, of course, if I can hear the argument now, well, if we didn't do it, somebody else would have. But that's not the point. There was a book, I can't remember the author, called Lab 258, and it's all about some of the diseases that have come out of Plum Island, West Nile virus, Lyme disease, etc. And it's quite an informative book. That's all I have to say, Mike.
Well, thank you very much. My understanding is they've actually relocated that facility back onto the mainland. I mean, having it on an island was kind of a good, safe idea.
Yes, and even then, things still got off the island.
Well, yeah, that's going to happen. I mean, the reason so many of these GMO companies have their test fields here in Hawaii is the theory that if they've made a mistake, it just stays here in Hawaii. But that's nonsense. When the first humans showed up in the islands, they were already completely overgrown with foliage and birds that were able to get here across an entire ocean. So this idea of water as a barrier, not really. It's not going to do that. Anyway, listen, Robert, we're going to let you go. We've got to take another break for commercials. We got more callers waiting on the line when we come back from these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to go right to the telephones. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike.
Hi.
Hey, Mike, before I talk about Syria, I just want to bring up everybody needs to watch It's a Wonderful Life, especially the bank run scene.
Yes.
Shows you how the scam works. Can't get any money because I don't have it. You know, Joe next door has got, tried to put an extension on a house, so I had to let him borrow your money. What a Ponzi scheme, what a Ponzi scheme, Mike. Right in that movie, it shows you how it works, Hey, Mike, on Syria, that plane that got shot down, so, I mean, there's still remnants floating around, so that's going to be happening, they only have a certain amount of missiles left and armaments. So they'll be weeded out. It's just going to take some time. It's just a shame, that these elements are allowed to go back, like you said, into these areas if they can make it where the U.S. Is supporting them. I don't know, it's going to come a time when the Russians just say enough is enough. I mean,
well, I think Putin would like to avoid that because he understands the long-term plan of the United States does include a war with Russia. The real issue is how many weapons are still being smuggled into these groups inside Syria. Obviously, if they're training on those U.S. bases and they're able to launch attacks from those U.S. bases, the U.S. could just be supplying them right there. And my understanding is the Syrian plane was actually shot down with anti-aircraft fire rather than a missile.
Was anti-aircraft fire? The pilot was killed, though, right? I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame. Remember what happened in Turkey when the plane got you and they dragged the body around? And this is the elements that our government supports. These creatures, these non-human. Hey, Mike, on that Russian bus, did you watch the video? I watched it a couple of times. I just thought it was odd how it went from a standstill and he turned left and went down right down the stairs. I just couldn't. If he had a brain, I mean, it was just a weird way. The bus was already stopped, I mean, it was just weird how it turned left and went right down the staircase like that. I just thought it was very odd.
It is very odd, and, of course, the driver, before the doctors said you can't talk to him anymore because he's got a brain hemorrhage, the driver said the controls just went crazy and the brakes wouldn't work. So my question is, does this bus have the same sort of computer system that we see in newer U.S. cars, where it could have been hacked from outside over Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or who knows what.
Like Michael Hastings.
Yeah, like Michael Hastings.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I wouldn't put it past them, but it was a horrible video to watch, though. I mean, it was pretty bad, I think only, 5 to 7 people died? Well, only. That's still a lot of people if you're one of them.
Well, it's 5 to 7 people too many.
Yeah, but good thing that had that low-hanging concrete overpass there. It kept the bus from actually going down any further, so that was a good thing that was there. If it wasn't, it would have went all the way down. That was down to the train.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, it would have been a far down way to go, all right, man, Mike, thanks a lot. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to switch over to Dave in Missouri. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, aloha and howdy, Mike. God bless you. I hope you had a great Christmas.
Thank you. I did. We did.
How's Claire feeling today? I haven't been watching you live. You probably already covered this. Is she doing better?
Well, we're both doing better. Claire, it's just taking a lot longer for her, and the problem is she's got a severe cough. It is not pneumonia. We had her to the doctors this morning. Mostly she's coughed so hard she's actually torqued her back, and that in turn is making it very hard for her to sleep. So the doctor prescribed some muscle relaxants and things to just kind of get her to relax, and hopefully we can get some sleep tonight, because we haven't gotten much sleep in the last 48 hours.
I understand, sir. Let her know that there's a lot out here in the Rivero listening audience who have her in their thoughts and prayers, and you too, sir. I want to touch a few points, and I'm going to get to some. Let me just say this. I'm in San Antonio today, and I spent a week in Connecticut. Got to take my lovely bride to New York City for the first time. We rode the train in to see Rockefeller Center. We were broke down in Connecticut. Made the best of it. Today I'm in San Antonio, and it was warmer in Connecticut last week than it is in San Antonio. This weather is strange, man, really strange. But I left her at home because she was sick too, and so I'm out here on the road with myself. But I want to touch a couple of points, and then I want to come to something that was a little contentious between us the last time, because I was rushed and you were low on time. It wasn't your fault. You were low on time. I called in at the wrong time, just like I did now. I wanted to call in before Dustin, the New Jersey Devil, got on, because I'd love to hear his comments about what I'm going to bring up. I love to hear Dustin. He's such a smart kid. He might not be a kid, but I just think the world of him. But how about Trump's executive order freezing the assets of corporations, foundations? I love that word in there. Individuals. Man, my word is that the D.C. lobbyists are like having to change their underwear every 2 hours. And the Podesta group is gone. Trump's not given enough credit for just scaring these people to death. Do you think it could possibly be that what you and I, would never have believed would happen in our lifetime could happen, and the Clintons might just see justice in 2018?
Well, obviously, I would like to see that happen after what the Clintons did to Claire and I 24 years ago. The issue here is Trump needs the cooperation of his administration to carry out the executive order. And he could run into the same degree of bureaucratic resistance that John F. Kennedy did when John F. Kennedy wrote an executive order basically breaking the Central Intelligence Agency up and moving covert paramilitary operations back over to the Department of Defense. And that executive order was simply never carried out because nobody who was along that chain of command wanted it to happen. So it's like I said earlier in the program, it sounds good, it reads good, it would in fact bear on the Uranium One sale. But I'm not going to get excited until I actually see something happen, like handcuffs around Hillary Clinton's wrists.
Well, we've lived long enough to know that you don't you don't eat the turkey before it's baked. My great fear is that the next generation is going to see what has been shown to us, which is, yeah, these people are above the law. They're better than you. You better drive 55. You better pay your taxes. You better walk in line. But these folks just get to slaughter and maim and rape at will. Brings me up, I'm sure you've probably heard this. I love what Ron Paul had to say. Hey, you think the architects of the welfare, warfare economy aren't also rapists? What's wrong with you? Maybe, just maybe, there's context finally coming to this where people who have lived their lives by morality and tried to dot the I's and cross the T's, not because we had to do it. We could have stolen from Walmart. We could have shoplifted everywhere we went. We could have skated on our taxes, but because we had values and we believed that it was important to contribute to the country and set an example for our children to be loving neighbors. Man, it would just be so cool if that could finally be vindicated and justified rather than see the thieves win every single time and skate away with all the money, and political power. What about QAnon, man? I am a hillbilly, so riddles kind of befuddle me. I don't have a lot of time for that. But I've been studying into this some lately, and it just seems like there is a deep source that's trying to telegraph that something real is going down behind the scenes, and it could come all at one time. I don't know. I haven't heard you talk about that, but, I don't get to listen all the time. What's your view on QAnon?
I haven't paid that much attention to QAnon, and I tend not to pay attention to very vague suggestions that something might be getting ready to happen. I really take the position of when it happens, then we'll deal with it. Because we have seen too many times where online trolls and propagandists and outright hoax websites, of which there is a growing number, will come on out and tease and say something like, one of the latest was George Soros suffered a heart attack. Completely false, completely false. Yeah. Just put out there to get everybody confused. So again, going back to Donald Trump's executive order, it reads really well if it can be implemented and directed against those who really are corrupt. It would be a good thing. But again, because Trump is surrounded by people who like things just the way they are, we may see absolutely nothing come of it. And so I'm not going to get excited until we do see something come of it.
No, I hear you, man, and I think the same way. I'm so tired of being teased and lied to. I'm an Arkansas boy. I've seen this go on forever, where they just blame their opponents for what they do and skate because all the press, all the media tells their lies. This has gone on forever.
Yes.
I would like to think that for my grandchildren's sake, eventually truth and justice will prevail. Now, Mike, this is where I'm going to get into a topic here where we kind of had a little controversy last time, and I didn't mean to throw it out as harsh as I did, but I was under time constraints and had to be quick. And if that's the case today, I just want to try to make a point. Now, I have a son and a nephew serving in Oahu, South Korea, in the Air Force. My son gets out in March. He's been there now for 3 years. He has a 4-year-old little boy. He's been able to see him one time in the last 3 years. The only way the little boy knows his daddy is through FaceTime. And communications have been weirdly disrupted between South Korea military folks and their families over the last month or so. He's even having trouble getting through that way. Now he's supposed to get out in March, and I have good. I've got a lot of connections. I'm no spring chicken. I've been around the block, and I've heard from several places that Trump has designs, if he hasn't already signed an order to perhaps attack preemptively North Korea in February, a month before my son could get out of there. Now, I am praying to the Almighty God that doesn't happen, not just for my son, for everyone else. I don't really believe in the North Korean nuclear threat, but I do know they have, like 1 million artillery pieces. If they get 10% of those rounds off toward Oahu, my son won't even know what hit him, or so many other boys. And so what if North Korea gets spooked into reacting preemptively because of all our warmongering? Could you blame them? But, there's those of us who have children in the way, and they didn't sign up because they wanted to commit atrocities around the world. My son was 17 when he signed up. He had no concept of that. He thought he was serving his country, thought he was doing a dignified, noble thing. as they all get conned into. And then they find out the realities. So where we had contention last time is that you had a caller who made a point that kind of blowing up China. Well, now this is the point that I want to try to make, Mike. In the late 1980s, there were public reports in the press. China's economy was so failed that their military was in dire straits. The children in Tiananmen Square, they had to bring the tanks in to put them down. I mean, there were reports they had like boots for every other soldier, a gun for every third, 4 bullets per gun. They had no Air Force, no Navy. Then Bill Clinton was elected, normalized trade with communist China. Walmart moved in. Everything suddenly is made in China. And now all the money that used to be for our middle class supporting our industrial base is used to develop the Chinese state. That's a good thing. But also, I mean, so long as it benefits the Chinese people, but also the Chinese military and backdoor financed North Korea. And so my point was, I don't really believe China is a communist nation. I believe China is a true fascist nation because they are owned essentially, they're financed by Western corporations like Walmart shoppers, who otherwise would have collapsed. You know, communism was pronounced dead at the fall of the Berlin Wall, and China was on the ropes until normalized trade and Western capital flooded in to save that regime, who does still, by the way, just last month, busted another underground church, seizing illegal Bibles. Man, that whole just that phrase, illegal Bibles, come on. So it's not our values that are paid for when you're supporting the communist regime of China, even though my argument is they're not so much communist as fascist, but who's to say we're not? And yeah, I mean, sure, we're guilty of many sins too, but and I'm not here to try to pick a fight with you, but my whole thing has been that American consumers and, the middle class has been duped into financing communist China, who has become a military threat that could rival us one day, and financed North Korea, who is now, we're rattling our saber again, and could legitimately threaten the lives of many of our boys, like my son, the most precious creature you ever met, greatest gift to God I ever had.
Okay, well, let me cut in here. Let me cut in here for a minute because we only got about 2 minutes till the next commercial break. First of all, the American people weren't duped into supporting the buildup of China. It came about simply because our government created laws which allowed American corporations to offload their manufacturing to China, where the manufacturing costs were going to be cheaper. And the fact that China prospered from it was the inevitable result of that. I don't think there was any other motive behind that. But yes, China took the money and they built up not just their military but their infrastructure. They're just now completing the world's largest radio telescope. It dwarfs the one down there in Arecibo. And so they're prospering because they are a manufacturing economy. And I don't think China.
But is that beneficial? Has that ultimately been beneficial to the American way of life, the middle class, our industrial base, our infrastructure, our grandchildren? So my whole thing is that, yeah, they were duped because they didn't think, okay, if my money is no longer circulating in my hometown in these factories who used to produce the merchandise that I purchased in my locally owned store, and if that money is now gone and vacant and sent to China, has this ultimately, to me it has always been economic treason, and I
actually agree with you. I actually agree with you, and unfortunately, I am going to have to say goodbye because we got to do a commercial break and we've got other callers waiting on the line.
God bless you. God bless Claire. Happy New Year to your audience, and please pray that sanity can somehow rule the day in 2018. God
Definitely
bless.
On that last one. All right, thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the telephones. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike?
Doing okay.
Mike, by the way, my best wishes to Vera.
Could you speak a little louder, please?
Yeah.
Yes, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yes, there you are.
Still there?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Saying my best wishes to Clara.
I will.
I hope she feels better. Anyway, I'm just wondering what's going on in Donald Trump's mind right now. He gets us into another war. And I'm not even talking about, God forbid, a war with Russia and China, which would probably result in, it wouldn't be in the next election. There probably wouldn't be a world left. But just to get another ground war, maybe in Korea or in Syria or anywhere else like that, doesn't he realize any chance he has of being reelected in 2020 goes right out the window? And doesn't he understand that, people who voted for him, most of us, we don't want this. This is the last thing I wanted. I voted for the man because I figured he wasn't a globalist. I figured he wasn't going to get us into more wars.
He campaigned on that. He campaigned on that. He said no more foreign interventions.
I think he's just got I don't know if it's the wrong advisors, but that's his own fault for hiring those type of people. He should have hired first of all, he should have never gotten rid of General Flynn. Flynn wouldn't let this go on, I don't think.
Yes.
Flynn understood a lot of stuff. He understood that we armed the terrorists, that we actually started ISIS. As I say, Obama and Hillary were actually the mother and father of ISIS. But he's just going, he's getting these neocons in there. They're giving advice. And, if we get in a war in Korea, for instance, this would be bloody because even without China or Russia getting involved, we're talking about, they're tough. Koreans are tough. Both the North and the South are tough. And that's just going to be pushovers and say, we drop a few bombs on them and that's it. They're heavily dug into tunnels. I was watching on a History Channel yesterday. Not a History Channel, an American Hero Channel, which is really an offshoot of History Channel. And it was showing it about Iwo Jima. How we pounded Iwo Jima with air power and naval power. And so I said nothing could really survive that. It happened again, I believe, in Iwo Jima.
Yes.
Not Iwo Jima, in Okinawa. Okay? But the Japanese were dug in. They were well dug in. And the Vietnamese were like that also. They knew how to dig into mountains. They knew how to dig into jungles. They knew how to build good tunnels. So it's going to take more. That means infantry will have to go in. I don't think we have enough troops right now to fight a war like that. By the way, I sympathize with that man who called you before. My son joined the Air Force a couple of years after 9/11. As soon as he was old enough, as soon as he graduated high school, and I kind of supported him at the time. Because I still believed in that. It was not a false flag. It was real.
Okay,
but
Mark, I'm going to have to put you on hold.
Yes.
We've got to do a station identification. Don't hang up. We're going to come back to you after these words from our sponsors, and we've got another caller waiting after you. And thank you, caller, for being patient. We'll get to you as soon as we can. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we were talking with Mark in North Carolina as to what Trump may be thinking as he moves forward clearly on this war agenda. Trump may not even be thinking about a second term. I know that seems unusual, but Trump may have just decided he wanted to be president just so he could say he was president of the United States of America, and he's not really concerned with a second term. One is going to be enough to get him in the history books. But again, he has gone overboard on the war agenda. And you're right. Part of the problem is he surrounded himself with advisors who were part of the problem to begin with. And far from draining the swamp, Trump has actually hired all the alligators to White House staff positions. And so he's literally surrounded by people who their own vested interests are involved in pushing that war agenda forward. He's probably being told by everybody around him, there is no other choice, you must do this.
Yeah, but, he's not even if he doesn't want to run, he's going to go down as one of the worst presidents ever if he gets us into a war, especially in a ground war. Again, we're not going to have, thank God my son didn't re-up. He didn't re-enlist. Okay, he he did his tours. He did 6 years, and he left. And because he matured, as I matured, I didn't even know anything about. I didn't know what a mouse was at the time. So he was a computer, so I wasn't able to find out anything on the internet. I had to go by the mainstream news, and I believed in, and I believed not all of it, but most of the nonsense that I was hearing. So, thank God he got out of there. And like I said, I really sympathize with that guy before. But I'm afraid they're going to have to go to a draft if this happens. And if you go to a draft, we're going to have all hell is going to break loose in this country.
I agree. I agree. They've been trying to avoid it. But, yeah, if they go to war in North Korea and it turns into a ground war, there will be a draft. And just because your children have served their time in the military does not mean they cannot be recalled to active duty. It can happen, especially if they have a needed skill set. They could be yanked out of their civilian lives and put back in uniform. And that's a reality that everybody who serves in the military has to be aware of. Okay?
Well, when I was in, I had to do 4 years, 2 years active and 2 years inactive reserve. So once your inactive time was over, that was it. They couldn't recall you. I guess maybe if an extreme emergency, maybe, but that was pretty much it. I think it's probably the same thing today, but who knows? I am, it's something to be concerned about because this is terrible. I mean, I don't know whether somebody what kind of advisor he's got that could pound some common sense into the man. Tell him, you're going to blow everything. You're going to go down as one of the worst presidents ever if this happens. And the worst case scenario, of course, is destruction of the planet. That's how bad this could be. I don't think Russia and China are going to get involved, to be honest with you, either in Syria or in North Korea, because I think they're going to just sit back and let us do in our own, what.
Yes.
But
that certainly seems to be what Putin's plan is to just wear the U.S. out in wars of attrition. First Syria, then Afghanistan, then maybe Iran, but basically just turn the Middle East into another version of Vietnam, which broke the back of the United States all those years ago.
Well, if we fight in Syria, it's going to bring Iran. Iran is going to be involved, and there's going to be and probably what I would think Putin's going to arm the Iranians and the Syrians at the same time, kind of like we did in Afghanistan to the Russians, to the Soviets at the time. That's what I think. And he's just going to sit back and say, if these idiots are this stupid and they want to do this again, well, let them do in their own what. I think. But I can't say for sure. Who knows? I don't know what the Chinese are going to be thinking if it's North Korea. They might do as they did back in, 1951, 52, and they may send in their so-called volunteers. So, this has all kinds of terrible possibilities.
Yeah, that's the thing. Looking forward along all these paths, they all lead to major war and bloodshed. And again, there are too few voices out there saying, let's try and calm the situation down. Anyway, Mark, I'm going to let you go because I want to move on to this next caller. George in Texas, welcome back to the show, and thank you for being so patient and waiting your turn for the phone call. So what's on your mind today?
Well, the thing is, I was sitting there reading about Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee bumping a first-class passenger off. And, I noticed on the Houston Chronicle and on, the local TV news station, they cut off all the comments. And the thing is, I was hearing people, she's a member of Congress. I said, the only time I think a member of Congress can bump someone's first-class seat if the president called a national emergency and they had to get to Washington, D.C. Otherwise, Mike, I don't really see any reason for a member of Congress to bump a first-class person's seat. I don't care who they are. Nobody should deserve preferential treatment. They should go through the TSA security lines for all I care.
Well, you're absolutely right. And what really angered a lot of people was, first of all, that Sheila Jackson Lee just apparently has a record of doing this. She'll come up to an airplane and say, I want a first-class seat, and the airlines will comply. even to the point of bumping somebody out of the seat. And I guess up until now, nobody really complained all that much. And now, of course, Sheila Jackson Lee is trying to play the victim card. You know, that this teacher only made a stink because I'm black, and I'm the victim here of racism. It's just making a bad situation worse. And the reason they're cutting off all the comments on the coverage of this story is because the comments have been almost universally negative. That if there wasn't a first-class seat available, Sheila Jackson Lee just should have accepted the luck of the draw and gotten whatever seat that she could. But to try and apparently pull rank and kick somebody else out of the seat they'd already bought and paid for, that's abuse of power and abuse of authority, and it's not what the United States is supposed to be like.
Well, you know, the thing is, I mean, and the thing is, too, it's more like Sheila Jackson Lee, I heard she is just as nasty and verbally abusive as Hillary Clinton. And, you know, this kind of, and the thing is, Sheila Jackson Lee is the purpose why we need term limits and need to go back to paper ballots.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, going back to Ron Paul's column on Christmas Day, and he's saying, yes, why is anybody surprised that our government behaves like this when the government as a whole believes in looting and plundering and pillaging the American people, foreign wars to steal their wealth? Of course you're going to have liars, cheats, thieves, and rapists seeking these offices of power. And yes, they're going to have election fraud as well.
Well, you know, the thing is about Ron Paul, when he was a congressman, he never flew first class. He always flew coach.
Yes.
Nobody ever knew that. And I don't really think Congressman Ron Paul would have bumped somebody's seat. I think he would be far more responsible of booking his own traveling plans.
I think you're probably right. But again, people like Sheila Jackson Lee, they just figure, you know, I'll just say I'm a congresswoman and they will make things happen for me. And that's not really the way it's supposed to work. And I don't blame that teacher for being upset. And I'm glad United Airlines gave her $1,000 in travel vouchers to make up for it. But it was a terrible thing to do. And remember, United is the airline that had those other issues of bumping passengers out of first-class seats or even off the airplane completely to make way for crew flights. And that displays an attitude toward the passengers that is not really very good. And I'm pretty sure that's why United was hoping this story wouldn't go away. But now that Sheila Jackson Lee's come on out and claims she's the victim because she's a victim of racism, I think United Airlines has got a huge PR problem on their hands right now.
About Claire, I know she's going to get well because you want to know why? The wives are supposed to outlive the husbands.
Ah, thank you for that reassuring thought, yeah, and I'll mention that to her.
Yeah, but anyway, too, it's more like, Mike, I also got, like I say, I'm supposed to start chemotherapy the 12th, and I'm praying to God that I ain't got to go chemotherapy. I'm supposed to do a CT scan because what the prognosis these doctors want me on is like, I don't like it, Mike, because it's just like, it puts me on a permanent treadmill, and something in my guts tell me, you don't have to go that route. So I'll keep you up to date on that. I'll let you make room to finish your show. Thank you, Mike.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot, George, and good luck with your medical issues. Boy, so many people are just dealing with so many illnesses right now here. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And the other day I was talking about infrastructure and not taking care of things. Well, it just hit Disneyland in Anaheim. Now, this is one of their busiest days of the year. Obviously, families come on out and they're visiting and they go to Disneyland. And they've had a major power outage that has blacked out the Fantasyland and Toontown sections and paralyzed a bunch of the rides, including the monorail. And so people are understandably very upset, especially how expensive it is to go to Disneyland now. And it really is. I mean, it's very, very expensive, and yet they're obviously not taking care of the facility. All right, we're going to take another phone call here, and this is Curtis in Arizona. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Can you hear me? I'm running in my car.
I hear you.
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay. these guys that are worried about Trump and whether he knows what he's doing in foreign policy, I look at it this way. He's one of two things. Either he's a white hat and he's doing all this saber rattling to placate those that he has to placate, okay, for the moment. Or he is a black hat and he's actually taking out the swamp in the same way that the SS took out the brown shirts, right?
Well, I'm not sure I agree with either one of those. I think Trump is just caught up in the excitement of being the president, and unfortunately it's turning out that he's very easy to manipulate. He does have to repay favors for the people who financed his campaign, like Sheldon Adelson, which is where we got that boneheaded thing about Jerusalem. But again, this goes all the way back, even when the campaign was first starting, and I said, I like Trump and I like what he's saying. Mostly, I don't want Hillary Clinton in the Oval Office. But I made the observation back then that, as near as I could tell, Donald Trump was dangerously naive about real-world politics in Washington, D.C., and foreign policy. And so he is dependent on his advisors, and the advisors are all basically, they're part of the original agenda. They're part of the reason Washington, D.C. is the way it is.
I don't know. I'm not so sure if I agree with that, because from what I understand, Trump has had a lot of communication even before he ran for president with people like Alex Jones, and he knows 90% of what's really out there. Now, if you look at the timing and everything, that when McCain made that no vote, okay, and then within a few weeks, you started seeing things turning around where these people stopped being so bold to the point where now they're saying, well, you know, I'm going to retire. I'm not going to run again. I'm going to go away. And see, what you're seeing, we're not seeing this. We're not seeing that these guys, this executive order is talking about harming human rights. I'm paraphrasing, but a lot of people are thinking that this order is going to cover things like child trafficking or any human trafficking, that this general order has got these people on the run. So I really believe it's looking more like he is doing something about not just, everybody who's involved in these kind of, the dark side, basically, of the power structure. And the only thing that's going to stop him is if they take him out one way or the other. Okay?
Well, again, like I said, I've read the executive order, and it does sound really good. The question is, can Trump actually put it into effect? Because, as I mentioned before, back during John F. Kennedy, when he wrote an executive order to basically take away the CIA's covert paramilitary authority and hand it back to the Pentagon, that was considered Kennedy's attempt to carry out his promise to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the wind. Right. But his order was never carried out because the people in the bureaucracy didn't want it to go forward. And so if you have a bureaucracy around Donald Trump that have all gotten rich off of their piece of the Uranium One deal, and they've all gotten rich off the Clinton Foundation and the rest of it, they're not going to allow the executive order to be carried out. They'll find ways to block it, to interfere with it. I mean, look at the way the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals Court keeps blocking Donald Trump on his lawful exercise of authority to control our borders.
Right. But I don't think he'll be afraid to use the military, though, Mike. I think their state of emergency thing could be for real. I just hope he's a white hat, I mean, if he's not, we're sunk anyway. So it doesn't matter. You shouldn't waste time worrying about whether he knows what he's doing. Because either way, something's going to happen. Anyway, the way I see it, Mike, is we don't have that much time left anyway. If we don't do something about this next generation coming up, just like that senator who says, I forget his name, that's going to run against him, the Republican, he knows that time is on their side, that once these young 30-somethings come into full power politically, it's going to be a war between the light and the dark, and the light is going away. Where he's getting too old, the dark was reared up without, us, we let it happen. And now that generation might be what takes us out.
Well, I think that's it's a serious prognostication. I want to keep the focus more immediate in terms of the very real possibility that an attack on North Korea could spin out of control, an attack on Iran could spin out of control.
Right.
And my concern that if it gets to that, war with Russia, war with China, we're already seeing the rest of the world start to unite against the U.S. We're seeing more and more nations are starting to pivot over to the Russian-China sphere of influence. And as a result, I think we're going to lose this war, even if it goes nuclear, especially if it goes nuclear. We're going to lose this war.
I agree, Mike. You know, and if he does go to war, that means he's been a black hat all along. That's the way I see it.
Well,
anyway,
I think it's more a case of him being manipulated into the war. He's being told by his advisors there is no other choice. There is no path to peace. Let's just move forward, and we're going to have to do it. Let's just get it over with. And that dovetails, of course, with that statement coming from the head of the CIA that we have to have war with North Korea within the next 12 weeks.
Oh, you know, who listens to them unless you believe you're gullible? I don't even bother listening to these people anymore. Anyway, Mike, have a good day, and I'm glad you guys are back. I hope Claire gets better. Okay?
Well, I certainly hope so, too, because apparently she's having a very rough time in there with her back pain. So next commercial break, I got to go see if I can help her. Anything else?
Okay.
All right.
No, I'm on the road, but I'll be listening, and I mean, somebody's bringing something up, you know, so I'll jump in and throw my 2 cents in.
All right. Well, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. And getting on back to the news, I'm looking at this chart one of our members posted at whatreallyhappened.com, and it's a map of how the House of Representatives is going to be altered by the illegal immigration. And the problem here is that illegal immigrants are included in the census counts used in the distribution of congressmen and congresswomen in the House of Representatives and the Electoral College. And it's very alarming because we're seeing states that are being flooded by illegal immigrants, like Washington State picking up a seat in the House, California picking up 5 seats in the House of Representatives, Texas is picking up 2, Florida 1, New York 1, and because the number of representatives overall remains constant, that means other states are losing representation because of the illegal immigration problem. Montana down 1, Indiana down 1, Missouri down 1, Oklahoma down 1, basically all across Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania. They're all losing influence in the House of Representatives because of this flood of illegal immigrants coming into the country. We're going to take another break for commercials. I'm going to go check on Claire, and we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are now open, 800-313-9443. And we're under another major rainstorm, and it's been very unusually cool here in Hawaii as well. In fact, yesterday here on Oahu, we actually set records for the intense amount of rain that came on down. So a lot of weather records, I think, are already being broken across the country as we head further and further into winter. Now, speaking of records, SpaceX is out there doing amazing work. And apparently SpaceX and other private American launch companies made 29 successful rocket launches into orbit. This is the highest since 1999 when they had 31. And it's one area of our economy where they're doing very well. And SpaceX, with their reusable booster rockets, is able to get payloads into orbit more economically than companies that use the use once, throw away approach. And it took them a long time to get that to work properly, but they've got it working. And now, of course, they're looking forward to a manned capsule to get astronauts up to the International Space Station, not have to go through Russia. And they're talking about a return to the moon and eventually a trip to Mars, which is going to be very difficult. I'd love to see that happen. I would love to see that happen. But they're doing really good things, and I wish them a lot of luck. And maybe they will be as inspiring to the current generation of young people as the original Mercury project was to kids of my age back when it happened. Because that idea of going into space, it just lit us all up. Everybody wanted to be into rocketry. Everybody was building model spaceships. Everybody was getting telescopes and studying the universe. So, now, getting on back to the weather, we're now seeing huge amounts of Arctic air flowing through the United States, and it's going to make its way from the northern plains to the eastern and southern U.S. Sunday into Monday. In other words, the New Year's holiday is going to be very cold. Temperatures in Minneapolis are forecast to fail to reach 0 degrees Fahrenheit over the weekend. Bitterly cold Arctic air will settle in across a large swath of the U.S. as we turn the calendar from 2017 to 2018, said AccuWeather senior meteorologist Dan Pidnowski. So the Old Farmer's Almanac had it right again. Winter got here late, but it's making up for it. It's very hard. Over in Erie, Pennsylvania, and yes, they do get a lot of snow because of lake effect, they got 60 inches of snow. And the city of Erie declared a disaster emergency because 60 inches of snow, that's 5 feet. And they are really feeling that as well. Meanwhile, the propaganda for the human-caused global warming people continues, and over at PBS, they're running a story. Even as Erie, Pennsylvania gets buried under all this snow, PBS is out there reminding us that global warming could drive 600,000 more people to Europe. It's the global warming that's driving this migrant crisis. They want to get away from the hot parts of the world into the cooler parts of the world. So they're blaming it on global warming rather than the machinations of the globalist New World Order. Now, the other day I was talking about my primary complaint about all of the environmental activists who want to ban all oil and gas usage is that they have failed to come up with something that represents a realistic replacement. And illustrating that is apparently green activists were running this advertising campaign that featured Doctor Who star Peter Capaldi, and it was put up as posters around the Westminster Tube Station and across London's transport network, and proclaimed that the price of wind energy had dropped by 50% over the past 2 years. This triggered a complaint to the Advertising Standards Authority, and because the claim that wind energy costs had fallen by 50% was demonstrably not true, Greenpeace and these other environmental groups have had to take the posters down. I'll bet you those will be collector's items for the Whovians. But again, if you read my article on ClimateGate, down at the bottom are quotes from some of the leading lights of the human-caused global warming movement where they say, yeah, of course we've got to lie. We're not going to get you to go along with our agenda unless we lie to you and scare you. And that's not how debate is supposed to work. Debate is you present the facts, and if the facts make sense, I go along with what you want. It's not acceptable to say, yeah, we're going to scare you into going along with me. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And this thing with Sheila Jackson Lee is really starting to blow up. Apparently, she's got a long history of imperious behavior. And I'm looking at an article in the Daily Mail. And the headline is, quote, "I'm a queen and I demand to be treated like a queen," end quote. How Congresswoman involved in race row on plane was chauffeured a block to Congress and was nearly banished from an airline before. And so they're basically going on over the last her entire tenure in Congress, 23 years she's been there. And apparently she has a long record of behaving badly on planes and automobiles. and she has a history of transportation drama, including berating flight attendants on first-class flights and making her congressional staff drive her 1 block, and then basically letting them sit there, blocking rush hour traffic while she makes a phone call. Apparently she calls her employees, "You stupid mother," you can fill in the rest. And apparently, this is a direct quote, in 1998, she was quoted as saying, "You don't understand, I am a queen and I demand to be treated like a queen." So this is really going to blow up in her face. I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be taking another close look at Sheila Jackson Lee. That's absolutely abominable behavior. Now, out in California, we've mentioned the problem with Nestle. Nestle's CEO is on record saying that he does not think humans have a natural right to water, that water should be commoditized, it should be marketed, and you should have to pay money for it. And Nestle makes a huge amount of money sucking water out of California's aquifers, putting them in bottles and selling them for $1 to $2 a pop. And it turned out that they've been doing it on an expired water permit. And even worse than that, the cost of the water permit was negligible. Nestle's getting this water practically for free. Well, California water regulators have now stepped up. And they're telling Nestle it's time to halt unauthorized water diversions, given that the company does not appear to have a valid water rights for much of the water it's been piping out of the San Bernardino National Forest and selling as bottled water. Well, good that they finally stood up for that, because California is dealing with water shortages, and letting some company privatize the water makes it worse, because there's a lot of waste when the water is being processed and filtered for those bottles. They're spilling twice as much down the drain as they are putting in the bottle. And the other aspect of it, of course, is the fracking, which has contaminated some of California's freshwater aquifers with fracking chemicals. Remember the promise? Oh, it'll stay way down in the ground, it'll never come back. Yeah, it did. California is now recommending that the contaminated aquifers filled with fracking chemicals be used for agricultural irrigation, which means in addition to the water having the fracking chemicals, some of which are carcinogenic, they're now spraying the food plants with it as well. Now, as you know, we have a lot of hunger in this country. Claire and I are involved in some food programs locally. And one of the things that is in the new tax bill has upset a lot of people. Now, even Bernie Sanders is admitting the GOP tax plan is actually going to be good for America's middle class. We'll wait to see that. But basically, looking at the way the tax laws are currently set up, and this gets back to ClimateGate, food producers are financially incentivized to send surplus food they have grown to green energy plants to be converted into ethanol. And they're disincentivized from simply donating the surplus produce to charities that feed the homeless. And by the way, I got an email from somebody who went and looked at that Skid Row 2017 video, and they were just shocked at what they saw. So basically, tax incentives are encouraging the denial of food to the homeless. And it's waste food, but it's going to the ethanol factories. That's pretty sick. Especially when you realize that ethanol didn't really work out. The promise wasn't there. You have to buy and burn more of it to do the same amount of work as a lesser amount of gasoline. It's bad for the fuel systems on older cars. And it's not carbon neutral. Not when you add in the carbon generated by the processing plant itself. Too much politics and not enough common sense in this country. We've had another example of price gouging by big pharmaceutical companies. The drug in question is called lomustine. It's been around for about 40 years, and it is a cancer treatment that allows patients suffering from brain tumors and Hodgkin's lymphoma to survive a great deal longer. Unfortunately, even though this medication is no longer protected by patents, there is no generic version, and the company that now holds the rights to lomustine has raised the price nearly 1,400%, 14 times, since 2013. Now, raising the price that much, I don't know what they think is going to happen. Most of their customers are simply not going to be able to afford it. We've had another story about flu viruses vaccines out of control. Story from Vaxxter.com. Apparently this woman, 34 years old, was given a mandatory flu shot by her doctor, and it partially blinded her, and she came down with multiple sclerosis, and the before and after pictures are stunning. They're just pushing this stuff out there. And by the way, when Claire and I went to the doctors this morning, when we went to the doctors the first time, it was almost empty. We were there today. The waiting room was just filled with people with this flu bug. It's got a 9-day incubation period, and that makes it very hard to track. But obviously, it is spreading like crazy. And I have heard from several authoritative sources that one of the reasons this flu is spreading out of control is this year's flu shot does not cover it. Whatever this flu is, it's a surprise. It's not in the current flu shot. What do the doctors and practitioners recommend? Oh, get the flu shot. Got to get the flu shot. Now, getting on back to Oklahoma, remember with the start of fracking, Oklahoma started suffering all kinds of minor quakes. And, of course, the fracking companies denied there was any kind of a link. Oh, it's just a coincidence. But apparently, Oklahoma last year started regulating wastewater injection. They put limits on how much water could be pumped down into the ground. And we're not even dealing with fracking fluid here. We're dealing with the wastewater, which is contaminated and has to be disposed of properly somewhere. And the fracking company's idea was, we'll just shoot it back down into the ground and it'll stay down there, which it didn't do. But apparently, the number of strong earthquakes in Oklahoma did, in fact, decline this year after the regulation of wastewater injection. All right, let's take a phone call. Brent in Wisconsin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hello, Mike. Every time I hear you or maybe John Stadtmiller or one of the other hosts on RBN mention Nestle's, I get a real bad feeling. And they're the company, the corporation that is easy for me to hate. And I'll tell you why. First of all, they're probably the world's largest producer of baby formula. And back in the 70s, I believe it was, maybe as early as the late 60s, Nestle's was dressing salespeople up as nurses and doctors going into third world countries and telling the lactating women in those areas how fashionable it was to feed their babies on formula, and how the ladies in the United States would do that, and it would free them up to go to golf outings or bridge club or whatever and not have to breastfeed their children. Well, these poor ignorant people in the third world countries were not able to read, many of them, and they wouldn't know how to dilute the baby formula and would feed it to their babies full strength, and of course the outcome was for the babies to die, or they would not be able to read the directions, and they would water it down too much, and the babies would starve to death. Or perhaps they were feeding their babies diluted milk formula properly, but with contaminated waters, killing their babies. And, of course, Nestle's had no problem with this because the bottom line was enriched. And, of course, when the lactating mothers stopped breastfeeding and they dried up, then they had to take money out of the family's meager budget just to buy formula, and many of them couldn't afford it, and their babies were subsequently dying.
Yes. I mean, it's one of the most ridiculous accomplishments of the advertising industry was convincing women that what came out of this laboratory and factory was somehow better for their babies than what their own bodies were producing. And it was absolutely ridiculous. And as you point out, it led to all kinds of problems. And they're discovering even today that there are chemicals in mother's milk that help the body fight off things like cancer. They're not there in the baby's formula. The baby's formula is a very thin simulation of mother's milk, and it doesn't have all of the really good things mother's milk has. And yet women were convinced this was the way to go.
Right, right. And thank you, Nestle's. Anyway, I just wanted to add that to the mix a little bit today. And God bless you and Claire. Have a wonderful New Year's, and healthy and happy and productive, and your listeners as well.
Well, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks.
We know corporations will do all kinds of nasty things. Remember when Bayer discovered that their treatment for hemophilia, their blood clotting factor, was contaminated with HIV. They didn't destroy it. They had to take it off the market in the United States, but they just shipped it to other countries where there were no laws regarding HIV, and they sold it to those people, and they gave them all AIDS. And that's how corporations think. And we're supposed to have a government that keeps an eye on corporate think so that they do not harm the general population. Under fascism, which is where we are right now, the government and the corporations are lined up together against the general population, which is why you get things like melanin. Remember the synthetic plastic that was put into dairy products, including baby food, to artificially make it look like it had adequate amounts of protein, only it wasn't a real protein. And there was a big stink. It was found in pet food, was killing pets. Then it was found in baby products. Natural News had an article up earlier today where apparently they're doing micrographic analysis of chicken McNuggets, and they're finding stuff in there that just doesn't make sense that it would be there. But we do live in a world right now where, because there is a shortage of real, healthy, natural, organic food, corporations are allowed to adulterate what they're serving to you. And when you see a TV commercial for a burger joint that advertises a 100% all beef patty, it's not 100% all cow. Beef is now a trade name that can be used to describe a big mixture of some beef, 10 to 20%, along with soy fillers and various other things. And they're allowed to say, this is beef. So when you go to the store and you buy a can that says tuna on the front, your first thought would be, there's tuna in this can. Not so. Tuna is a name that is now allowed to be used with something like 17 different species of fish. When you buy a bottle of honey, it's not always out of the rear end of a bumblebee. Many so-called honeys are little more than sugar water, coloring, and flavoring. So you've got to be very, very, very careful. Now, do you remember middle of the month, there was this asteroid that flew past Earth, and it kind of caught everybody off guard. They didn't see it coming early. They only picked up on it when it was just getting ready to whiz by, and obviously it did miss us. And apparently it turned out that this asteroid was a lot bigger than previously thought, and the new observations on that asteroid conducted from the 15th to the 19th show Phaethon to be about 3.6 miles wide. Now, that's not quite the size of the Chicxulub dinosaur killer, but that would definitely cause a tremendous amount of problems if it hit here on Earth. So keep your eyes to the skies, and we'll see what's going on up there. I am a big astronomy buff, and I do like to get out and watch for the meteor showers. We actually have very good skies here in Hawaii. Even on Oahu, we get a little smog, a little haze. But boy, if you're an astronomy buff and you get here to Hawaii, make a point of going up to the observatories. And there's a little halfway spot where there's a center, a visitor's center, and it's not open at night. But it's advised that you stay there and get used to the altitude for about a half hour, because the main observatory is at 14,000 feet, and if you're not used to it, you will get very dizzy. Another cool thing that you can do is take a bottle of water, not from Nestle, and you empty it out, and then you cinch the cap down real tight, just throw it in the back of your car. And by the time you get back down to sea level, that bottle will have been crushed down by the change in air pressure. And as I understand it, the 30-meter telescope is proceeding on the top of Mauna Kea, and I think that will be absolutely amazing when that's up there. As I mentioned earlier in the show, China is just completing the new world's largest radio telescope, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. We're going to take our last commercial break, and we'll be back with our last segment after these few words. America, welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today here. And a lot of the members are putting up stories at whatreallyhappened.com about the curative effects of ordinary things that you buy at the store. Spices, things like garlic, turmeric, and of course the big corporate pharmaceutical corporations don't want you to know about natural cures or how certain foods are good for you in a medical sense. They want you to think that the only way that you can deal with any illness is through their little potions and pills and bottles, and that is simply not true. Now, obviously, I'm not a doctor. I played one once in a movie. But given all of the recent scandals regarding vaccines and vaccine injury, I think people do need to be a little bit less trusting of the medical industrial complex and just take it upon themselves to learn as much as they can about what it takes to be healthy. It's just common sense. I mean, when you own a car, you've read the owner's manual, you know the basics on how to keep it running. You should be doing the same thing for yourself and understand that ever since the Health Maintenance Organization Act was signed by Richard Nixon, medicine in this country is big business. It's not a service. It's not a benefit. It's just another way to extract huge amounts of wealth from ordinary people and basically exploit their fear of illness, injury, and death. Get them all scared about the terrible things that could happen. If they don't buy and use that medicine, oh, bad things will happen. Now, apparently down in Australia, there has been an act of vandalism at this park where it was this preserved dinosaur footprint, theropod footprint, three-toed, one of the Allosaurus, T-Rex, those kinds. And apparently it wasn't well known where it was. Tour guides would have to take you up, push the brush aside and say, here's this fossilized remnant of the dinosaur footprint. And for some reason, somebody went on in with a hammer and smashed up this fossil footprint. And you have to wonder why. It doesn't look like they were trying to chisel it out and take it away. It just looks like they were smashing up the footprint just for the joy of smashing up the footprint. Now, I know that there are some individuals of a highly religious bent who believe that the earth is only 6,000 years old, that all of modern science and geology and chemistry and physics are wrong, and a bunch of Bronze Age goat herders somehow got it all right. And these individuals have, in the past, sought to destroy evidence of anything that doesn't line up with their religious beliefs. And not understanding that once you've destroyed that evidence, it doesn't mean the evidence didn't exist, only that you destroyed it. But I can't think of another reason for somebody to go on in and smash this thing up. And that is a real loss. We don't get any more dinosaurs, despite what Jurassic Park would have us believe. So we got to take care of those fossil remnants that we still have. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get back to taking care of I got to take care of Claire. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller's program. He's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please share what you learn here with everybody that you know. We're still trying to get the truth out there against this tsunami of lies. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.